Hello guys, in this video I'm going to show you how I created this painting titled The Miracle of Life, and I'll show you how I created the underpainting and what techniques I used to paint this picture.
Hello, in this video I'm going to explain how I approach painting using traditional oil painting techniques and modifying those techniques to suit my purposes. There are several ways of painting. You could start painting from, on white canvas and do a color layer as your underpainting. But most of the time, the traditional oil painting involves creating underpainting in a very limited palette, and usually it could be just a mix of brown and a little bit of black. It could be a mix of black, brown, and white, or it could be a greenish underpainting like we can see in Italian paintings. Some of the paintings had a very greenish underpainting because the skin tones of a white person actually have a lot of green in them, and by creating this underpainting, you kind of solidify the form, and then when you start applying the actual skin tones like light pinks and such, you already have that cooler green, and when you apply pinkish tones on top of that, it creates a very nice contrast. So let's begin.
I used to paint on canvases, but now I paint on panels most of the time because panels are more archival and they're sturdy, they don't twist and turn, and I think panels provide a much better support than the canvases can. And sometimes I paint on canvases when I paint really large, and it's just a lot more convenient, and the canvas itself is lighter. If you want to create quality work, paint on high quality panels. I Photoshop my image and I sketch it out on a separate piece of paper, and then I use transfer paper to transfer my image onto the panel. I try to be as precise as possible when I draw and transfer the image because it affects the outcome of painting. I use Gamsol to dilute the paint, and I use cold pressed linseed oil as my medium of choice. I'm including a list of supplies in the show notes. Please look them up. I have the links. You can follow the links to buy the art supplies. In this painting demonstration, I started working in two colors. Well, basically I use just one, burnt sienna, and I add a little bit of ivory black, to make the darkest areas. And I also use a little bit of titanium white. I must say that this burnt sienna is kind of cool. It's not the same color as this one, so I recommend using Winsor & Newton burnt sienna to create warmer underpainting. This one reads much cooler. You can see it over here, and if I take this one out, This one reads a lot warmer, and your goal is to create a warm underpainting. Here you can clearly see the difference between burnt sienna colors that I used. One is by Winsor Newton and another one is by Gamblin. The challenge that I had here, I began painting on a very smooth panel, and it kind of absorbed the paint a lot, and it made it very difficult for me to apply the paint. That's why the first layer was really crude and almost unmanageable. I had to use Gamsol to dilute the paint a lot and to make it work. So that's my ugly stage of painting. But I underpainted the basic shadows using burnt sienna. When the underpainting is dry, I pre-mix my paint. I always have a string of grays to knock down the chroma, make all the colors less bright. And I also pre-mix the colors for the skin tones. Also, as you can see here, you can achieve a perfect match of any color that you want by mixing it up and using the back of your palette knife to see if you got the color right. A little bit of story behind this painting. I titled it The Miracle of Life, and it depicts feelings of human resilience, hope, and love. And my inspiration for this painting comes from the idea of samsara. I believe that we have a circle of life and that everything that's living becomes the one in the end. And so I think that humans and the natural world are the same. We are all together, and that's the basic idea behind this painting. This is my first color layer, and again I rely on my previous layer, and I start painting from the shadows once again, but then I begin tiling the paint, meaning that if I start painting in one area, I continue painting around it, changing color temperature and value to paint the face. And to create the image of this painting, I basically had an idea, and then I searched for the references to put it all together. And I usually use Photoshop to combine different elements and to make a layout so I don't have to change anything when I start painting. And I used to print my collages, but now it doesn't make any sense because the printout has always different colors than I see on my computer. So I use a large monitor, projecting the image and painting from the monitor. When I apply first color layer, this warm underpainting shows through a little bit. It gives my colors a little bit of warmth that I like. And as I keep painting, I begin to try to refine my drawing make it more precise, because now it's getting easier to apply paint as well. When I paint fabric, I focus on the overall shape, and I also look at the color of the shadows to put them in first. And for instance, when I paint the arm, I can see the basic pinkish color that actually has a lot of burnt sienna in the mix. And I focus on the shadows, painting it, leaving the whites alone, and then I add a little bit of lighter paint to create those textures in the fabric. I always think how this pattern or texture of the fabric wraps around the shape, and I try to repeat that when I paint. That's how I make it look more round and three-dimensional.
So here you can see that I've done a very rough underpainting, and then I did one layer in color, and this one, the owl still has the rough underpainting, and the cat doesn't have the first color layer, but the figure was completed. And also I filled in the background to make it, to establish the color as well. And at this point, what I'm gonna do, I'm going to, do the color layer on the animal and the bird. But when I get to this part, it's still kind of wet, so I don't want to touch it. But the final step here would be applying details. But before I do that, I want to comment on just a few things for you to see. When I paint, I'm thinking of the roundness of the shape. Okay, when I begin painting the color layer, it's not just about the color itself. I'm also thinking of value, how light or dark it's going to be. And I'm thinking of edges. Some edges need to be sharper, more crisp, and other edges need to be softer to create interest. And so when I begin painting the cat, I would be thinking of color, values, edges, and also the anatomy of the cat. It looks a little bit weird at this point. I want to make sure that the neck kind of transitions into the body a lot more. And also I'm thinking of the texture of the cat.
because when I painted this part, for instance, I was thinking of the texture of the clothing that I wore. Is it soft? Is it harsh? Does it have a specific type of texture I need to portray? And I'm thinking of the brush stroke to describe that specific texture. That's how you make things look real. It's about capturing the correct shape and form of the person or animal or whatever else you paint, but also it's about creating texture that looks very real, and it comes with understanding of textural, of the effects. I often study art history. I look at the paintings of the old masters to see how they approach a specific subject. For instance, if I start painting the fur, I'm gonna find portraits. So I would find a reference in art history depicting that object or subject. I try to basically take that and apply it to my art. So you will see me creating softer strokes and observing how long or short the hair is to describe the form. And the same is true about the bird. It's also about creating a specific texture with short and long strokes, and the change in stroke direction that describes the form. One more thing that I want to mention here is that I want to talk about the importance of fixing or correcting the anatomy and the form in general. I find it very difficult to keep the form, the shape correct. It's a lot easier to do in drawing because the pencils are sharp and your strokes remain in place, which is not quite true in painting. It kind of tends to fall apart as we keep layering strokes. And every time I begin painting and I finish painting, I check for the anatomy, trying to see if it if it falls apart. I want to bring it back. For instance, I always check the position for the eyes. See, this is the general direction, and it should match with the position of the nose, the lips, and the chin, and the hair as well. And I keep checking for that position every single time because it tends to fall apart. Also, I already fixed the ear some because as I kept painting, it kind of grew out. This is very common. I mean, you start painting one thing and it kind of grows out and becomes too big, or it loses its original shape. And when the head is in such position, the direction of the ear comes to this, and I constantly look at my reference and see how wide this should be, because yesterday it was a lot wider and I cut it off with the color of the background. And this is something that you need to think about as you keep painting. Also, I'm looking at the neck, and the overall shape is a cylinder, but it looks kind of mechanical. It doesn't feel like it's turning all the way, and I'm gonna change that. I'm gonna look at this curve and I'm gonna look at this curve. Perhaps I would curve this out more and would curve this in more to create more of a curvature, to make it look more real. And also, this is just the first color layer, so I'm talking about things that I'll be fixing as I keep developing the painting to a finished degree. I'm also thinking of the roundness of the shape. The face consists of two planes. That's the first plane, right? And that's the second one, or the side of the face. So these two these two planes are not the same. This needs to be in the light and it rotates that way, and this needs to be in the dark, and it rotates, it goes in that direction. And it's important to catch with my strokes and values to create this roundness of the shape. The same is true about the neck. It feels kind of flat right now, but I'll be creating transitions between the tones to create this curvature and roundness of the neck. I've already done it over here. I feel like it's working out quite well. Now I begin adding color, painting the cat, and again I vary my brush stroke, and I try to create a little bit of texture by placing different strokes. I keep watching the symmetry of the head and the face, making sure that the eyes look even and the ears look even, things like that. Here I complete the first color layer, painting the bird, and once again I break it down to several big shapes. Like one shape is the head, another shape is the body, and then the feet. And all these shapes have different direction and unique volume and texture. While I'm gonna apply textures at the next step, here I just think of volume, and again I focus on the shadows, figuring out how dark they should be in comparison to the lights. I made the second color layer for the background, and while the color is kind of similar, it helps to deepen the color and also create variation. Also, I like repainting the background the second time and sometimes the third time when I want to soften some edges. For instance, I soften the edge here and over here, and I do it throughout the painting because I want to have, harder edges, creating contrast with the softer ones. And then I want to add some depth by adding a darker value next to the edge, and then just softening this side. Also, please remember not to use any kind of medium in your underpainting, and use it sparingly in your second and third layer to increase the flow. I use cold pressed linseed oil. Our oil paints already have some medium in it, and it's not necessary in the first layer because the medium kind of weakens the paint a little bit. Use just a little bit to make the paint flow. I increase the amount of medium with every new layer, and it's called painting fat over lean. Well, this took me a long time to understand how to make very thin lines painting in oil. It's extremely hard to find the right kind of brush that creates thin lines. It's a lot easier to draw in pencil because the pencil stays sharp. This is much harder doing in oil paint, and I recommend trying liner brushes. They seem to be all over the place, but when you actually add a little bit of linseed oil into your color, it comes to a point, and then when you make a stroke, it could really you could really make a very nice and thin stroke, but just practice on a separate piece of canvas before you try it on your good painting. Unfortunately, I didn't record it correctly. My phone seems to move the image when I paint for a long time. And here I basically came back to painting the face, refining the shapes and colors. When I refined the colors, I also add textures to the hair, and most of work, it's very long and tedious, and actually you would be bored watching this kind of video, but I basically add very little paint, trying to create softer variations in the face or fabric, and that takes most of my time. And I add textures and little variations with tiny brushes like liner brushes or round brushes that's 18-0. And this is really time consuming, and sometimes it takes 90% of my painting time. As a very last step, I've decided to lighten up this area because there is a lot of light hitting this space, and what I do, I basically make a mix of white with a little bit of warm brown, and I brush it over, and now I would take most of it off, but it would leave this lighter haze where I need it to be. So the key would be just blending it into the rest of the face so it's not so obvious. And I can do so with the brush or my paper towel. I dip my brush into the medium, and I can blend using the linseed oil. See, I will take most of it off but it still has a lighter value on top of my basic painting that I've done.
Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope it helps you in your creative endeavors. And please like, share my video and comment. It helps getting this video out to more people who could enjoy painting as well. Take care. Bye-bye.